Fritzie Zivic was the youngest in his household. His parents had come to America with nothing but dreams and hard hands. His father from Croatia, and his mother, Mary, from Slovenia. They settled in a tight, wild part of Lawrenceville where the streets weren't always kind, but they were always alive. From the moment Fritzie could walk, he was already learning how to duck. Not from bullies, well, maybe sometimes, but mostly from his older brothers, who were always sparring in the living room, the kitchen, the backyard, anywhere that had space to throw a punch. The Zivic house wasn't quiet. It shook with footwork, echoed with laughter, and carried the sound of gloves slapping into flesh. They were known around town as the Fighting Zivics. Fritzie watched them all, their sharp jabs, quick feet, and tough faces. His brothers Pete and Jack were legends in the family, even making it all the way to the Olympics in 1920. But Fritzie wasn't trying to follow anyone's shadow. He was figuring out how to shape his own. He grew up in the Ninth Ward, a place where you either stood tall or stayed out of sight. You either had to fight, Fritzie once said, with a smirk, or stay in the house. We went out, and he really meant that. Every alley was a ring. Every day was a test. But Fritzie didn't just fight to win. He fought like he knew something, like he carried all the weight of his family, his neighborhood, and his name in every swing. He was smaller than some, but his punches felt like truth. Not loud, not flashy, just real. And when people watched him in the ring, they didn't just see a boxer. They saw a boy who had turned the hard parts of his life into something sharp, something strong, something that made people cheer. Fritzie wasn't just another fighter. He was the kind of fighter who made you believe in him. Back home in Pittsburgh, the crowd was buzzing. On March 21st, 1938, Fritzie Zivic stepped into the ring with another hometown fighter, Charlie Burley. Everyone knew Burley was slick, sharp, and dangerous. But Fritzie wasn't afraid. He had faced tougher things growing up than a man in gloves. That day, Fritzie didn't just box. He outfought. Charlie started strong, dancing around the ring, landing clean punches. But Fritzie had something Charlie didn't. Grit built from years in smoky gyms and alleys filled with rough kids and harder lessons. By the later rounds, Fritzie dragged the fight into his world. The messy, up-close kind of fight where your breath hits your opponent's face and there's no space to run. He dug his right hand into Burley's ribs again and again. He leaned in during clinches, shutting down Burley's long, pretty punches. Fritzie won that night. He won the way he always did, by turning the ring into his home and never letting the other guy breathe. But boxing isn't always fairy tales. Fritzie would meet Burley 2 more times after that. Once in June 1938, then again in July 1939. And both times, Burley figured things out. Fritzie lost those fights, both by decision. But that's boxing. Some days, you're the hammer. Some days, you're the nail. What mattered to Fritzie was that he kept showing up. Then came a bigger mountain, Billy Conn. It was December 28, 1936, when Fritzie faced Conn, who would later become world light heavyweight champion. Over 5,000 people packed into Duquesne Garden. The fight was tight, real tight. Early on, Conn landed a right hand to Fritzie's chest that slowed him just a bit. But Fritzie wasn't the kind to back down. He came alive in the next rounds, dragging Conn into his kind of fight. On the ropes, face-to-face, fist-to-body. In the 4th and 5th, Fritzie punished Conn. People started whispering, this might be it. He might knock him out. But Conn was tall, 6'2", and smart. He danced away, used his reach, jabbed from far, and stole back points round by round. In the last few rounds, Conn stayed on his toes, popping jabs, feinting, moving fast. Fritzie kept charging in, throwing body hooks, trying to slow him down. But Conn held on, and in the end, the judges gave the win to Conn. Fritzie didn't complain. He walked out of the ring the same way he walked into it, with his head up, because that's who he was. A man who didn't need shiny belts or loud cheers to know his worth. Win or lose, if you faced Fritzie Zivic in the ring, you remembered him, not just for the way he fought, but for the way he never stopped fighting. By 1937, Fritzie Zivic was no longer just a kid from the Ninth Ward. He was building a name, slowly, fight by fight. February 11th, Duquesne Garden. He stood across the ring from Johnny Jadek, a former junior welterweight champion. The last time they met, back in 1935, Jadek had taken a win by points. Fritzie hadn't forgotten. This time, he came out like a storm. In the very first round, He dropped Jack to the canvas for a 9 count. The crowd roared. Fritzie could have gone all out then and there, but he held back just a bit. He was smart, waiting for the right moment. Round 2 came, and just as the bell was about to ring, he caught Jack again. This time Jack hit the floor for 5 seconds before being saved by the bell. But in round 6, Fritzie ended it for good. A clean shot. Jack went down and didn't get up. 1 minute and 16 seconds in, and it was over. Fritzie didn't shout. He didn't dance. He just stood there, quiet and proud. He had even the score with a man who once beat him. And that win? That one meant something. But Fritzie wasn't done. On January 20th, 1939, he was back in the ring, this time against Jackie Burke. Burke was no small name. He held titles out west, and he had a reputation for being tough as nails. But Zivic knew how to break through tough. The fight was close, blow for blow, step for step. But it was Fritzie's uppercuts, those sneaky, powerful shots during the messy, inside fights, that made the difference. The referee leaned towards Zivic. One judge called it a draw. The other saw it clear. Zivic was the better man that night. And then came one of the biggest nights yet. August 29th, 1940. Forbes Field, Pittsburgh. This wasn't just another fight. This was a shot at getting closer to the welterweight crown. Across the ring was Sammy Angot, the reigning lightweight champion. Big name, fast hands. But Zivic didn't care about names. He cared about moments. And this was his. The fight went 10 rounds. And while the first few were close, the last 6, they belonged to Fritzie. He pressed forward, picked his shots, and turned every round into a chapter of a story he was writing with his fists. When his hand was raised, the crowd knew what it meant. Fritzie Zivic was now 1 step away from a shot at the world title. And for the first time in his career, he earned his biggest payday, $3,200. It wasn't just money. It was proof. Proof that the quiet boy from a crowded neighborhood, the one who learned to fight just to live, was now fighting for history. January 17th, 1941, back at Madison Square Garden. But this time, everything was bigger. The pressure, the crowd, and the fight itself. Over 23,000 people packed into the arena. The biggest crowd ever to watch a boxing match indoors. They had come for one reason, to see if Fritzie Zivic could do it again. Beat Henry Armstrong, the man who never stayed down. Armstrong was angry, determined. He wanted his title back. But Fritzie? He was calm, focused, and more dangerous than ever. From the first bell, Fritzie went to work. He found Armstrong's face wide open and didn't waste time. He jabbed, then slipped in those short uppercuts he'd become known for, clean, sneaky punches that snapped Armstrong's head back over and over again. The third round gave Armstrong a spark. He landed hard hooks, and for a second, Fritzie wobbled, but didn't last. Fritzie shook it off and kept coming. By the 6th, Fritzie's right uppercut landed again, this time sending Armstrong down to the canvas. He got up, but his body was telling a story his heart didn't want to admit. He was wearing down. In the 8th, the beating grew worse. The referee paused the fight just to check on Armstrong's cuts. The crowd saw it too. Fritzie wasn't just winning. He was breaking a legend. Still, Armstrong had fire in him. In the 11th round, he charged like a man with nothing left to lose. He pinned Fritzie in a corner, threw punches like rain, head, body, head again. For a moment, the crowd felt that old Armstrong magic. But it was only a moment. The doctor checked Armstrong before the final round. Let him go one more time. But Zivic didn't give him any space. 52 seconds in, Fritzie's left hand landed again. And again. And again. The referee had seen enough. He stepped in, waved it off. Fritzie Zivic had done the impossible. He didn't just beat Henry Armstrong. He stopped him, for the first time ever. And in that moment, surrounded by the cheers of 23,190 people, Fritzie stood not just as champion, but as the fighter who proved that brains, timing, and quiet fire can outlast even the greatest names. No loud words, no fancy talk, just a boy from Pittsburgh who learned to fight in the streets and never forgot how to finish what he started. July 29th, 1941, Rupert Stadium, Newark. Fritzie Zivic walked in wearing the crown. He was the welterweight champion of the world. But boxing doesn't care about crowns. In that ring, every title is just a borrowed thing. Across from him stood Red Cochran, strong, rough, hungry. From the first bell, it wasn't a clean fight. It was more like something that belonged behind a bar, not under bright stadium lights. Cochran hammered Fritzie with left hooks to the body. Zivic came back with sharp rights. But soon it turned ugly. Fritzie tried to wrap his arm around Cochran's neck, aiming to pound him with his left, a trick he'd used before. Cochran ducked under and came up with his head. Zivic got butted hard. Then things got worse. Cochran threw a left hook low, right into the groin. He said Zivic had been thumbing his eye. The crowd roared, half in anger, half in thrill. The referee gave the round to Zivic on a foul. But still, the damage was done. Zivic, though bruised and worn, wasn't done fighting. In the last 5 rounds, he came back like a man with nothing left to protect. Punch after punch, he tried to drag the fight back in his direction. Some in the press believed he won those final rounds. Others saw it differently. The referee gave Cochran 7 rounds. For Zivic, for even. The judge scored it the same. The United Press called it a draw. But the title left Fritzie's waist that night. He didn't cry. He didn't complain. He just left the ring like he always did. Head high, chest bruised, heart still burning. And then, like only Zivic could, he came right back swinging. September 15th, 1941. Forbes Field, Pittsburgh. His people were waiting. Nearly 25,000 of them. A sea of faces who knew his story, who remembered when he had nothing but brothers, gloves, and a backyard to fight in. That night, he fought Milt Aaron, a man who had knocked him out 2 years before. This time, it was different. Zivic was sharper, tougher, meaner. He punished Aaron up close in the first 4 rounds. Inside fighting was his world, and he dragged Aaron into it. Then, in the 5th, as Aaron tried to slip away from the corner, Zivic launched a beyond-the-lookout punch, a wide, crossing right hand that smashed Aaron's jaw. Down he went, out cold. The crowd went wild. That punch wasn't just for a win. It was for everything Fritzie had ever lost and learned, from narrow streets, bruised ribs, swollen eyes, and titles that slip away like water. That night, he didn't need a belt. He had the people, and they knew. Fritzie Zivic never stayed down for long. By early 1942, Fritzie Zivic was no stranger to pain, pride, or pressure. He'd won, he'd lost, he'd bled. But on January 16th, under the lights of Madison Square Garden, he met someone different. Sugar Ray Robinson. He was younger, faster, some even said perfect. Fritzie had heard the whispers. People were already calling Sugar Ray the future of boxing. Some thought Fritzie didn't stand a chance. But Fritzie never listened to that kind of talk. When the bell rang, Robinson flew like lightning. Sharp, blinding punches, quick as breath. The crowd watched as the young star danced through the early rounds, piling up points. Fritzie fought back, as always, digging into the 6th with body shots, and owning the 7th with hooks to the ribs that made Robinson flinch. But youth is its own kind of power. In the 9th, Robinson landed a long, snapping right that sent Fritzie down hard. He got up. He always did. But in the 10th, after a flurry of punches, both fists swinging, Fritzie went down again. The crowd held its breath. He was already trying to rise at the count of 6, still fighting like he always had. But the referee stepped in, stopped it. 31 seconds into the round. It was over. Only the second time in Zivic's long career that he had been stopped before the final bell. He didn't argue. He didn't blame anyone. Because deep down, Fritzie knew what kind of fighter he was. And he knew what kind of fighter he had just faced. Sugar Ray Robinson would go on to win 27 straight, with 21 knockouts. That night, Fritzie had been part of history, even in defeat. But losing didn't break him. Just 2 months later, on March 9th, Fritzie returned to Pittsburgh's Duquesne Gardens, where the air smelled like home and the crowd always leaned in his favor. This time, he faced Izzy Giannazzo, tough, proud, Italian, and once a contender for the world title. But Fritzie fought like a man who still had something to prove. From the first round, he swarmed. Fast, brutal, focused. By the second round, Giannazzo's eye was nearly shut. Zivic kept aiming at it, clean shots, one after another. By the time the bell rang for the 5th round, Giannazzo didn't answer. The fight was over. Zivic had won without question. Then, just a few weeks later, on April 13th, Fritzie climbed back into that same ring, this time against Maxie Berger, a proud Canadian fighter known for his sharp footwork and clever defense. But clever doesn't always beat relentless. Fritzie knocked Berger down 7 times. Not once. 7. In the 4th, 6th, 8th, and 10th rounds, Berger kept hitting the canvas, each time slower to rise. Still, Berger had fire in him. In the final round, he fought back, just enough to make it even. But by then, it was too late. Fritzie had already taken the fight, and the crowd, round by round. He'd pressed through pain, through age, through doubt. He may have lost to Robinson, but he reminded the world what kind of fighter he really was. A man who never stayed down. A man who fought with memory, grit, and something deeper than talent. May 25th, 1942. Back home in Pittsburgh, the city showed up in full, 12,000 strong, voices loud, hearts ready. And there in the ring stood Fritzie Zivic, steady as ever, waiting for the bell. Across from him stood Lou Jenkins, the former world lightweight champion. A wild puncher, a hard hitter, a man Fritzie had already gone 10 rounds with before, back in 1940, at Madison Square Garden. That fight had ended in a draw, but Fritzie wasn't here to draw again. From the start, he boxed like he had something personal to say, with both fists. Left hook, right hand, short jab, body shot. Over and over again, he carved his way in. Jenkins tried to hold his ground, but Fritzie's punches found every mark. Early on, he opened up 2 old cuts on Jenkins' face. The blood started to come, and it didn't stop. By the middle rounds, Jenkins wasn't just losing, he was falling. 5 different times in the 2nd, 6th, and 8th rounds, Jenkins spun off balance and hit the canvas. Not official knockdowns, but the message was clear. Jenkins couldn't keep up with Zivic's speed, accuracy, and sharp, relentless pressure. By the end of the 9th, Jenkins was barely holding himself together, his face swollen, cut, and leaking red like a cracked pipe. The ring doctor took one look and shook his head. No more. The 10th round never came. The fight was over. The crowd roared. Zivic didn't raise his hands high. He didn't need to. He had said everything with his gloves. He hadn't just won. He'd finished it. Decisively, painfully, and beautifully. That night, in the same city that raised him, Fritzie Zivic reminded everyone, fans, writers, and fighters alike, why he mattered. He wasn't built for flash. He wasn't chasing headlines. He fought like a man who carried memories in his muscles. And on that May night, every punch he threw was a reminder. He wasn't done yet. By 1943, Fritzie Zivic had already seen the top of the mountain and clawed his way through some of the sport's fiercest names. But now, at Madison Square Garden, he was face to face with a young storm named Beau Jack, a fighter fast, hungry, and full of fire. Twice they met. Twice the garden rumbled with the noise of fists and fans. And twice, Zivic walked out without his hand raised, though never without a fight. The first came on February 5th, 1943. Over 21,000 packed the seats, eager to see if the rugged veteran could outwork the new lightning bolt on the scene. For 12 rounds, it was close. Grit versus speed. Old school pressure against raw energy. Zivic took heavy shots, gave some back. But in the 8th, he fired a low blow. And that one moment, that single mistake became the swing in the scorecards. Jack took the win, and Zivic took the lesson. 1 month later, they did it all again. March 5th, same city, same ring, different crowd. A little smaller, but just as loud. This time, Zivic came in heavier, with longer arms and a deep well of experience to draw from. And for 12 rounds, the fight unfolded like a gritty chess match. Each round filled with bruises, strategy, and fouls on both sides. Zivic boxed from long range in the 6th, a rare sight. Jack answered in the 7th. In the 8th, Zivic was getting battered, but a foul call swung the round his way. Then Jack suffered the same fate, took damage but stole the 9th with a foul call of his own. It was ugly. It was brutal. It was real. By the 10th, Zivic surged again. But in the final 2 rounds, Jack pushed harder, swinging wild, swinging smart, trying to erase any doubt. In the end, the judges gave it to Jack, but not by much. Zivic had taken 5 rounds on all cards. It was close, bitter, and without a belt on the line, it still felt like a war. Maybe he didn't get the win, but once again, Fritzie proved what kind of man he was in the ring. Not always the fastest, not always the cleanest, but always dangerous, always durable, and always hard to beat. He didn't just fight to win. He fought to leave a mark. And with every loss that looked like a draw, and every draw that felt like a win, he kept doing just that. By the summer of '43, Zivic wasn't chasing belts. He was chasing names, and writing his own into the record books with blood, bruises, and sheer grit. And then came Jake LaMotta. The Bronx Bull was young, just 20. 10 years younger, faster, stronger. He came charging like a storm. But Zivic, he wasn't the kind to back down. Not in Pittsburgh. Not in front of 15,000 of his own. LaMotta started like a man possessed, landing clean shots in the first, and pushing Zivic to the ropes. But Fritzie had a way of turning pain into patience. By the 5th and 6th, his left jab began finding its home. By the 10th, he was unloading, ripping into Jake, working that jab like a hammer, staying strong where others would have faded. It was a split decision. Some thought LaMotta edged it. Others said Zivic outlasted him. But the only thing that mattered was the judge's call. Zivic wins. It was the only time he'd do it. They met 4 times total. In the rematch, just a month earlier, LaMotta had squeaked by in another split. In the November return at Madison Square Garden, and again in January of '44, Zivic came up short. Even with LaMotta losing rounds for low blows. But that one win in July, that one moment, that was Zivic's night. He proved that even a charging bull could be slowed down with experience and a punishing left hand. But the road didn't get easier. Just a month after his victory over LaMotta, Zivic faced Bob Montgomery, the reigning NYSAC World Lightweight Champion. It was a non-title fight, but Zivic came in hungry. And Montgomery? He came in like lightning. Fast, sharp, and ruthless. He painted Zivic's face with jabs and combinations. One judge gave Zivic just 2 rounds. Another was more generous, scoring 3 his way, with 2 even. But the truth was plain. Zivic had been outboxed. It was a clear loss. But for Zivic, every fight was another mark on the wall. Win or lose. His name stayed etched into the story of every man he faced. He was a reminder that greatness isn't only measured by titles, but by who you stand against and how many times you refuse to stay down. By 1944, Fritzie Zivic was fighting more than just men in the ring. He was also serving his country. A private in the Army Air Corps, he traded his boxing trunks for uniform pants, but he never walked too far from the ring. He couldn't. It was part of him. But even warriors grow tired. On March 29, 1944, Zivic stepped into the ring against Freddie Archer in Elizabeth, Pennsylvania. People believed in him. He was the favorite. They thought the old fire in Fritzie's fists would burn through. But Archer didn't care about stories or reputations. He came out swinging, with left hooks that thudded against Zivic's head and ribs. He pushed, pressured, and pounded. Fritzie tried to tie him up, tried to stay afloat. But it was clear, this one wasn't going his way. Even in the 7th, when Zivic unleashed a flurry of strong lefts and rights to Archer's face, the younger man stood tall, shook it off, and kept pressing. By the final bell, it wasn't close. The referee gave Zivic just 2 rounds. Still, he didn't sulk. He took the loss like he always did, with his chin up. 3 months passed. Then came Tommy Bell. After 1941, Fritzie Zivic never fought for a world title again. But that didn't stop him from walking straight into fire. Between 1941 and 1946, he stood toe-to-toe with giants. Sugar Ray Robinson, Beau Jack, Tommy Bell, Billy Arnold, Jake LaMotta, Freddie Archer, 7 future Hall of Famers, 9 world champions. Fritzie fought them all. No excuses. No hiding. He won some, lost some, but he always showed up. Always. His final record, 158 wins, 64 losses, 9 draws, and 80 knockouts. Not bad for a boy from Pittsburgh's 9th Ward, who once said you had to fight or stay inside. Fritzie went out. Yes, he fought rough. Sometimes too rough. He thumbed eyes, threw elbows, hit low. But he'd also say, "I'm sorry," before the final bell rang. He was a street fighter with manners, a rare kind. People described him best. A body like wire, a mind like chess, a sharp wit, and a smile you couldn't forget. Even as the world changed, Fritzie didn't stop trying. After the war, where he served in the Army Air Corps and still boxed while stationed in Texas, he tried just about everything. He managed fighters, promoted bouts, worked steel mills, sold drinks, bartended, became a disc jockey, even worked construction, always trying, always hustling. He was no stranger to hard work. The gloves came off, but the fight stayed in him. In his later years, the toughest battle came. Alzheimer's disease took his memory, then a stroke stole his voice. For 3 years, he stayed in the Veterans Hospital in Aspinwall. The same hands that once battered champions now rested quietly by his side. He passed away in 1984, silent, peaceful, and finally done fighting. But his story didn't end there. In 1993, they put his name where it belonged, in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. And in 2024, the Croatian American Sport Hall of Fame added him to their legends. Fritzie Zivic wasn't perfect. He wasn't polished, but he was real. A fighter, a brother, a soldier, a father, a man who came from nothing and gave everything. The world forgot him for a while, but history didn't, and neither should we. Fritzie Zivic didn't just fight in the ring. He fought through life. Rough, real, and unforgettable. A true warrior whose story still swings today.